Online or here in person, welcome to tonight's event, Electrifying the Clean Industrial Deal for a Competitive Industry Decarbonization. My name is Dave Keating, and I'll be guiding us through tonight's discussion, for which we have a very full house here this evening. We still have people trickling in here. I can tell this is a topic of keen interest at the moment. And as we know, electrification in general is a very big topic of interest in Brussels right now because of its immense decarbonization potential. So we know that electrification is needed. Everyone kind of agrees on that. But if we're going to reap the rewards of electrification, both for reducing energy costs and for lowering emissions, we need to know exactly how we can harness that potential. And we have to know how we can measure it. And that's why we're gathered here tonight. We're going to hear about the analysis by the French utility EDF of how we can get to the goal of massively electrifying industry by 2040. So we're going to hear a breakdown of the consumption of energy by energy type and by industrial sector in Europe. And we'll also hear about the potential by sector. We'll also hear more about the electrification value chain, the European suppliers of industrial electrification solutions, and how to get electricity from one place to another. We'll also hear about the alternative, where these opportunities are not grasped. What are the risks of non-action? Could Europe become even more dependent on imported fossil fuels? Could costs continue to increase along with emissions, leading to factory closures and companies transferring out of Europe? So we want tonight's discussion to be as interactive as possible. We're going to first hear a presentation of the EDF report, and then after that, we'll have a panel to discuss it. And you'll be able to ask your questions both about the report and to the panelists. So you'll be able to, both whether you're watching online or here in the room, you'll be able to ask your questions on Slido. You can scan the QR code that's there on the wall, and I think up on the screen now, yes. So you can scan that QR code, it'll bring you up to the website. You can put in your questions even from right now if you already know your questions. On the report, I'll be putting the questions directly to the report's presenters right after their presentation. And also at the panel, I'll be putting your questions to the panelists at the end of the panel. So now I would like to introduce EDF's EU Affairs Deputy Director, Antoine Bizet, for some introductory remarks. Antoine?
Thank you. Sorry, it's the way we want to boost electrification. Thank you, Dave, for having set the scene quite perfectly. Just to thank you all to be here this evening. When we decided a few weeks at EDF to organize this event, maybe like this, it's better. The Commission just issued the Clean Industrial Deal, and good news, electrification was at the very center of this initiative. Now, a few weeks after, it begins to be more concrete, and we will have the possibility, the opportunity to talk about the draft texts that are under construction by the Commission. So that is to say, Decarbonization Bank. Thank you, Mr. Paco, to be here. But also stated new framework, the Accelerator Act. So there are different tools now under construction that we are very eager to see how they will help to boost electrification. So it's very timely, and again, thanks to all to be here. Special thanks to our colleagues Aurélie and Jean-Philippe to present our views on these challenges. Special thanks also to our panelists, Mr. Paco, Mr. Delastic, Mrs. Couderi. We hope she will arrive very soon. And Frau Curtis, thank you also to be here. Thanks to Euractiv for hosting this event, and thank you, Dave, to moderate it. Once I've said that, I give you back the floor, and I guess my colleagues will come on scene. Thanks again, and have a great, fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Antoine. So now we're going to get a presentation from Aurélie Orquibal and Jean-Philippe Laurent on EDF's vision for the decarbonization of industry and the role of electrification. First up will be Aurélie.
Good evening, and thank you, Dave, for this introduction, and thank you all for attending this presentation on the key role of electrification for industry decarbonization and also for European resilience. So last year, we shared with you in Brussels at the very same place EDF's net zero scenario for Europe, which is a normative scenario that has been built by explicitly modeling the energy system of 15 European countries that are representative of the whole Europe and including UK. And to make it short, the main conclusions of this scenario were that to reach carbon neutrality, we will need to reduce our energy consumption by 40% by 2050, and we will also need to shift from fossil fuels to decarbonized fuels, with electrons who will play a key role at that time and who will represent around 57% of the final energy mix. And of course, we will need other decarbonized energies that will be, for example, hydrogen and e-fuels. Just to remind us of the conclusions of this net zero scenario, another one is that electrification will play a key role for European decarbonization in all sectors of the economy. And regarding buildings and transport, the solutions are identified, available, and the issue now is to deploy them at scale. And regarding buildings, one of the main solution, the main electrification solution will be heat pumps. Regarding transport, it will be EVs, both for light-duty and high-duty vehicles. And so now we just need consistent public policies in the long run to make this transformation happen. Now, industry is the cornerstone of the transformation. It is a much more heterogeneous sector and much harder to decarbonize as well. And today it is around 30% electrified, and we anticipate that the electrification rate could reach 54% by 2050. And we will now focus on this sector in particular. And so we wanted to share with you a view of the energy consumption of the 6 main industrial sectors in Europe that represent in total 80% of the energy consumption. And these are the chemicals industry, the steel industry, the non-metallic minerals, that is to say mainly the cement and the glass industry, the food industry, the pulp and paper, and the aluminum industry. And the remaining sectors are either less energy intensive or more diffuse, and automotive industry is in the remaining part. And here we focused on the energy consumptions of industry, but in addition, you also have the use of raw materials as a feedstock that is not counted in here. And as you can see, the consumptions are rather heterogeneous, but the common pattern is that industry is still heavily relying on fossil fuels, mainly gas, but also in some sectors coal, for example in the steel industry. And this explains why the CO2 of industry are still quite high, reaching 475 million tons right now. And electricity accounts, so as we said before, for 30% of the energy consumptions of industry. And today it is mainly used for motors and pumps, or for some specific processes such as the electrolysis of alumina or electric arc furnaces in the steel sector. But it is really scarcely used for heat production, whereas it is a suitable lever for heat decarbonization and heat production. And that's what we're going to focus on next. Yes, here we go. And so here we tried to split the heat needs of the industrial sectors according to their temperature, because one thing to remember is that the higher the temperature, the higher the technological costs to decarbonize it and to electrify it will be. And so when we focus on the lowest temperature needs, that is to say below 150 degrees, at that temperature level, you have existing solutions that are available and mature, that are mainly heat pumps or mechanical vapor compression, and whose efficiency is 2 to 3 times higher than the one of their fossil fuel alternatives, and therefore they can penetrate the market economically, even though they may need still some capex support at the moment. Between 150 and 500 degrees, you also have mature electric technologies are available. Yes, for example, electrical boiler. So they are mature, but they may need some support, as long financial support, as long as the CO2 price are not high enough. And above 500 degrees, then you need more higher density energy or very specific technologies, and that which increases the technological costs. And so our main message that we want to share today is that, of course, it is important to focus on the hard-to-abate sector and on the most at-risk industries in Europe in terms of competitiveness. But it is also key and it is also a priority to address those low-hanging fruits which are much quicker wins and which are all the technologies with heat needs below 500 degrees. And we are starting from 30% electrification. We know, thanks to external studies, and the one from Fraunhofer Institute is a very good one on that topic, that the electrification rate of the heat could be almost total, and therefore we could have an electrification potential, a technical potential up to 95%. However, we consider that we will not reach that technical potential because it's not a techno-economical optimum, since, for example, you won't replace existing biomass plants with electrical heat. Both are decarbonized, and if you have the assets, you'll keep them. So the techno-economic lies a bit below this potential. However, to achieve it, we need to overcome three major kinds of obstacles today. The first one are organizational and cultural obstacles. For example, it's difficult for an industrial player to transition from a well-known equipment or energy to a new one, and all the more if it has to review deeply the process on site to introduce this new equipment, and it has to be taken into account. There are also economic challenges, and Jean-Philippe will come back on them later. And you have to take into account that industrial equipments have long lifetime, and it's important to overcome the economic obstacles at the moment when you have to replace the equipment. And there are also, in some cases, technological obstacles when you reach, especially high temperature needs, where you still need to develop some technologies like electrical furnaces, like plasma torches for some industry. And so to fully materialize the potential of electrification of industry, you have to overcome these three kinds of obstacles. So finally, to come back to our net zero scenario, we tried to evaluate the level of electrification that we can reach by 2035, as well as the energy consumption in all the 6 sectors that we mentioned earlier. So I will not detail, except if you have specific questions, each sector, but just to give you an example, in the food industry, what we can anticipate is that the electrification level will increase thanks to the deployment of heat pumps, for example, and at the same time, the energy consumption of the sector will decrease just thanks to exactly the same heat pumps that will be deployed. And all in all, we can anticipate a decrease in energy consumption by 10% by 2035, and also a decrease by 25%, that is to say roughly 100 million tons per year of the CO2 emissions. And this will be possible, so if we manage to materialize the electrification potential of industry, and by addressing at first the quick wins, that is to say the low temperature heat below 500 degrees. And so now I let the floor to Jean-Philippe Laurent. We will share with you some feedbacks from the field and first examples of tangible business opportunities related to this electrification.
Thank you, Aurélie. Yes, so my role after this introduction is to give you some examples of where we are and what we can do with the different technologies. The first one, I will start with the below 150 degrees. As was stated before, those technologies are existing, they become mature, and they are, as you say, OPEX beneficial. I mean, they can be effective in OPEX. We have here technologies that address can address this temperature are heat pumps. It can be standard or high temperature heat pumps, as we call them, or mechanical vapor compression. If you know, sorry if you know already how they work, but the idea is to take temperature that are waste heat around 70 degrees, for example, and to rise it up to 100, 120, 140 degrees, sometimes even 150 degrees. And the idea is that to heat it up, it costs much less thanks to this heat pump or mechanical vapor compression than if you had to directly inject fossil fuel. So to produce, I mean, you take one electricity, you take 3 energy from the waste heat, and you produce 4. The basic idea is so that you have an overall efficiency of 4. One of the examples, I mean, it is well applied when you look at it in some industry. You have seen it, paper, food and beverage, textile, some chemicals where you have this low temperature needs for especially drying, and is one of the examples we want to show. This is a dryer for a pulp drying system where we have used waste heat from 70 degrees. We rise it up to 140 degrees. We have an overall output of 600 kilowatt, but we only use 150 kilowatt of electricity to do that. So we installed it more than 1 year ago, and we have tested it during 1 year, and we can have these figures on 1 year, which is more than 3.5, what we call the COP, coefficient of performance, for that. This has been made feasible with a subsidy. You still have a need to invest and to put a subsidy in the CAPEX, because CAPEX is a bit expensive. This subsidy was at the order of magnitude of 20 euro per ton of carbon avoided. Okay, so that can be rather effective. The rest of the investment was part of the normal investment that an industrial would make with an IRR, which is reasonable in its framework. The second part is above 150 degrees. Here you have different technologies. The first one that I would mention, which is efficient in terms of performance, is the heat pumps, which are high temperature heat pump or very high temperature heat pump, and steam heat pumps. Those are not fully mature. We need still some development. The good news is that when we will finish these developments, they can come with very high efficiency, and this efficiency can, like in lower temperature, offset the spread between gas and electricity, which is what we expect. So we just need to help the investment, and then it flies. They will reach temperature up to 200 degrees. Probably not much more, but those are the things that we can up to. The other technologies that are boilers, furnaces, induction furnaces, are technologies that are fully mature. You can use them. Their main drawback might be the cost, investment cost in some cases. It's not the case for a boiler. An electric boiler is very simple technology, and it's not very expensive to invest in. Yet, the efficiency, you have an efficiency, and I will come back to that, but the efficiency does not cover the gap between price between electricity and gas. So you have an OPEX issue as an industrial. Yet the good news is that you have efficiency. You look at it, you see that for an electric boiler, on average, you have 10% more efficiency than with a gas boiler, because you can more focus your heat. With an induction furnace, you can have up to, say, 40% of gain in energy efficiency. So by doing that, you get a gain. This gain is not enough to cover the gap price between gas and electricity again, but you still have a gain that you can use in your overall business plan. One of the examples is on the hot rolling process. You see that this nice part, which is produced here, the temperature reach is more than 1100 degrees Celsius, which just can be achieved via induction furnace. Okay. This one is running. A side effect is that we have an improved quality because of induction. For those who know, you get a better temperature repartition, homogeneity within the part, so you get a better quality of the part than when you are with a regular gas furnace where you have different heating in the different parts. This one was made, again, it was a first of a kind, and the help was at the level of 50 euro per ton of avoided CO2. I will come maybe on this one. One of the difficulties we have with those technologies that are, again, existing is that you cannot cover with the efficiency the price gap. So you still have an OPEX issue. And the OPEX issue is even further because, what we have put on the right, that you get, depending on the countries or on the tax system, but you can sometimes have 4 times more tax on electricity than on gas. Okay, so you have an amplified problem with your tax. You also have a price of electricity which is higher, and that is made with the merit order on the way the price of electricity is formed. So you have an electricity price which is higher than gas. That is a kind of mathematics, unless you have a CO2 price which is very important. Okay, today it's not the case. So today you still have a price gap. The good news is that you see we have plotted the investment curve for a 10 megawatt boiler, electric boiler in France, with some data in France. And you see that the spread, which is this represents the spread between gas and elect, the OPEX of a cost. You see that because the CO2 price will increase, at some point we will reach 0. So the spread will be cancelled. So the good news is that we only have to give subsidies between, depending on the model, 10 to 15 years to help the investor to invest in that technology. Okay? So we need OPEX subsidies, but that will not last 30 or 40 years like the furnace will last, or the boiler will last. Okay. If I come back on the other one, another very important point for us is where those equipments are coming from. Okay. And we have made a study, and this study shows that today we have a very strong and stable base of equipment suppliers for these electrification solutions. You see here for the 4 mains, you have the name of the different suppliers. They are all located in Europe, and 80% of their own value chain is European. Okay. And most of them, especially in the furnace part, are exporting, and they are leaders in exportation of their technologies. So that's good news. That's a rather big, depending on European scale, but that's 3 to 4 billion euro market, 80% internal value, and 50K jobs in that. If we want to use them, you can use them to extend. Here we have shown, so it's a bit a complex slide, sorry, but we have shown that if you want to move from 2024 to 2035 in 10 years with electrification according to the model that Aurélie has shown to you, we would require in total 50 gigawatt of cumulative installed base of electrical solutions. If you take what the current European industrials can produce as equipment to supply that, you see that already with their current installations, they can supply 50% of the demand, which is quite nice. The good news is that they can go even higher, provided that we can give them some visibility, long-term visibility on the movement towards electrification. So they are ready to invest, they are ready to improve their plants so that they can produce more equipment that we could install. So we have the means to develop electrification via a supply chain which will be European. To close it and leave the floor to questions, maybe a few words of conclusion after Aurélie and I. We believe that there is a road for electrification in this industry. Technologies are matured. We see that we still have an issue with investment a little bit in the low temperature, investment on CapEx in the high temperature, but this will not last long. What we need to propose is to have a stable framework to trigger decisions. And we believe that it's part of it. And one part of this stable framework is the electrical market design. We need the market design to be stable. We should not reopen it and rediscuss it. Okay, we believe that the current one can allow long-term contracts and give the visibility needed by the industry to invest. Another example is also to be able, I think Mr. Paco will talk about the decarbonization bank, so maybe I do not need to come back on that, but we strongly believe into that, provided that it's also able to supply, to put some subsidies on OPEX, not only CAPEX, but also on OPEX. Okay. And if I add to, I will not list all the 9 ones here, but another one is to allow also an easier grid connection and access to the grid. Okay, and that's something we have some ideas to propose into that, and we need to make sure that, again, the legal framework allows the grid operators to connect more rapidly the industrial who want to invest in decarbonization. Thank you for your attention. There is these 2 presentations, and we are open to questions. Or maybe I leave the floor to Dave, who will open the questions.
Thank you very much, Jean-Philippe. So, Orly, you can join us on stage as well. So again, this will be your time to put questions about the report specifically. Type in your questions to Slido. I'll get them here on the tablet, and I will ask them to both of our guests. So this first question doesn't specify a responder, so I'll put it to you, Orly. So the question is from Alexandra Tudoriu from Cogen Europe. Have you considered hybrid systems, such as combining industrial CHPs with heat pumps or e-boilers? The heat pumps would run when renewables are abundant and prices are low, and CHP would ensure remaining demand of heat and electricity at times of low renewables and high prices.
I may start to answer, but I think Jean-Philippe will add some points. Maybe we can enlarge the topic, and yes, of course, there could be a way to combine both existing fossil fuels heat production with electrified production, all the more with technologies that are not that CAPEX intensive regarding electrification, and this enables to switch from fuels depending on the electricity price. Not only when renewables are abundant, but when electricity price, even made with nuclear power, is abundant and electricity prices are low.
Philippe?
Yes. Sorry, you have to switch the mics. Okay. Yeah, of course, you're right. That's feasible. Having a kind of a hybrid boiler house or hybrid utility system. Depends what your goal is. If you want to achieve 100% decarbonization, everything which is hybrid will miss the point. Yet if on the low short term you want to achieve something economically viable, then that might be a solution, because you have some part of the time where thanks or because of, depending on which side you are, of the renewables, you will have lower price on the market. And if you have the ability to benefit from this lower price of electricity, then you can remove gas while paying less on the market. And you will easily, depending on your configuration, pay back your electrical boiler, which will be in parallel to your gas boiler. So that's something that is feasible. Or I say boiler, but it can be CHP, of course.
Next question is about the low-hanging fruit, Aurélie, that you mentioned, particularly when the heat is below 150 degrees. You mentioned these technologies are available and widespread right now. What is the obstacle to take up? Why aren't people taking up those low-hanging fruit opportunities?
So at the moment, we know that for those technologies, their efficiency will enable them to not to have any big OPEX issue, but still the obstacles may still be some CAPEX issues, and the availability of the specific of the how can you say, the one that you focused on, the provider of those technologies don't always have the plant built for those technologies. And as we also said, there are some organizational obstacles and the need to ensure the industrial player that in the long term it will still be the decarbonization path that will be preferred.
Maybe I will add a word on that. Everything that you said and complement. I mean, another point is the ability to find engineering houses bureau d'études in French. You will translate it. Study houses, design office, who will be able to implement electrical solutions. Because if you are, let's say, small size companies where you have one boiler, you would like to switch to electrical boiler, then you have to turn to your regular engineering houses, and they need to have the right competencies to do so. And today, they are a little bit afraid. So, of course, you need long-term stability. Of course, you need investment subsidies when it is necessary for the business case. But you also need to have partners who are able to do that. And we need to develop those partners who usually are very good in gas and sometimes needs to improve or build capabilities on electricity.
We have one last question here from George Harding. I'll let you guys decide which one of you wants to take it. The question is, to what extent is the technology, such as heat pumps, transferable across sectors, or is it specific to each sector? For example, does a heat pump for textiles with textiles wet processing look very different from one used in the paper and pulp industry?
I'm not sure I'm able to answer this question. We can answer it later in more detail.
What I would say, I will not answer directly to the question, and sorry for that. What I would say is that today, each installation is made almost on purpose. I mean, you redesign it to fit the industrial process of the investor. And what we need to do is to be able to have a more industrial way of having some kind of modular system that you can pile up to really answer the needs. But basically, you have differences in waste heat temperature, you have differences in the type of heat or steam that you need. They are not always the same. And you have different places in terms of the way to integrate a certain process. You have different humidity systems. So requirements. So it's very complex. Today, we redesign them on purpose. And we need to work a little bit on industrialization to reduce the cost and to be able to produce them more. Then the different equipments that are part of a heat pump are the same. So usually they can be standard, but the way you assemble them is sometimes a little bit on purpose.
Well, thank you both for an excellent presentation. How about a round of applause again for them? So Jean-Philippe, I'll have you join me now here on the stage with our other panelists, who I will introduce you all to now. So I'd like to welcome here to the stage Alexandre Pacaud, who's been name-checked a couple times already, I think, in the presentations with the Carbon Bank. So Alexandre is the Director of Innovation for a Low-Carbon Resilient Economy at the European Commission's Climate Department. Then we have Philippe Delastic, who is CEO of Clairefontaine, a French stationery company founded in 1858. Then we have Benedetta Scuderi, who is a green Italian MEP and member of the European Parliament's Industry and Energy Committee. We have Frauke Thies, who is Executive Director of the think tank Agora. And, of course, you already met Jean-Philippe Laurent, who is Development and Strategy Director at EDF Customer Service and Territories Division. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Alexandre, let me start with a question for you. First, I just want to get your reaction to the 2040 scenario from the Commission's perspective. Do you agree with EDF's findings on the potential for electrification? And do you see a trade-off between large energy-intensive sectors and this low-hanging fruit that Aurélie was talking about?
Thank you very much, Dave, and good afternoon, evening, all of you. And thank you for inviting me. I think this is a very topical subject here in Brussels at the moment, not only in Brussels, really across Europe, because I think we all want to find solutions for industry to decarbonize. And I think the report from EDF is very interesting because it brings solutions to our challenge of decarbonizing industry. And it also clearly shows that it can go hand in hand with increasing the competitiveness of industry. So by reducing the costs of fossil fuel use, by increasing our economic independence, that really these are very important features to strengthen the competitiveness of industry. And this is very much at the core of the Clean Industrial Deal that you now all know about. So I will not dive too much into it. But the core elements of the Clean Industrial Deal is what we also heard from EDF, is to create a business case for all these technologies, including electrification, because we know electrification will be a very important pathway to decarbonize industry, but also transport and buildings. I think we share the same analysis that if we look ahead, 2040, 2050, all our impact assessments show that we need to use electricity more in Europe to decarbonize. So how to create a business case? That's the challenge we all face. This is what we try with the Clean Industrial Deal to provide some answers. And maybe later on we can dig into some of the answers, in particular in terms of how to finance this transition, how to address this OPEX and CAPEX issue that we just heard. And I think there we think we have some already good example with the Innovation Fund, but also with the Industrial Decarbonization Bank, but I can maybe say a bit more later. But my first reaction is very positive. Thank you.
Good. Philippe, let's turn to you next. So tell us about Clairefontaine and the company's views on electrification. What strategies have you adopted to decarbonize your processes, particularly through electrification now? And how does that fit with the 2040 scenario we just heard about?
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. Clairefontaine is a family-owned company founded in the mid-19th century. It currently holds 4 paper mills in Europe, and we produce each year around 250,000 tons of premium paper for printing and writing. So quite difficult moment for the paper industry right now because of digitalization, etc. As it was mentioned in the former presentation, the pulp and paper industry has always been like a pioneer in energy efficiency and also decarbonization. We were the first industry, heavy industry, to switch from coal or fuel to natural gas, and then from natural gas to biomass. And moreover, in the 80s, almost all the paper mills in France were equipped with electrical boilers. So this is not a new topic for us. We have not addressed it only for decarbonization reason, but also for energy efficiency topic. But it's been 15 years that we have been pushed by our customer to reduce our carbon footprint. And at Clairefontaine, we decided to build a 3-steps plan. So the first one was to switch from biomass first, from natural gas to biomass. So we built three big plants in our 3 factories. In 3 factories, we reduced by 50% with that and our footprint compared to beginning of the year 2000. And the 2 other steps, the 2 next steps, are about electrification. So the second one is the installation of electric boiler. So it is the simplest way, considering our thermal need around 200 degrees, which is not exactly the same as pulp industry. It's a bit higher. And so we will build this we are about to build these three big boilers, which will cover maybe 10 to 20%. It is not completely sure of the thermal need of the company. We do not expect these boilers to be running all the time because of the spread between gas and power costs. But we rely on some customers to pay for an extra to get decarbonized paper. So that's the main business model for this electrification. And the third step of this program is a combination actually of steam heat pump and mechanical compression, steam compression. But this topic is getting mature nowadays, and we expect this to be running in 5 to 10 years. But the capex in that case will be very high, which is not the case for the electric boiler, which is not that expensive.
Thanks a lot. Let's turn to Benedetta next. Benedetta, let me get your reaction also to the scenario. And coming from the lawmaker's perspective and as a member of the ITRE committee, would you say that the stagnation of electrification, so kind of also I think that the stops and starts that we've seen over the past years, does the Parliament see that stagnation, and what are some policy remedies that could be used to get electrification moving again?
Yeah, I'm not sure the Parliament sees the stagnation. I'm scared that the Parliament at the moment is not really understanding the importance of electrification. There's a push to look in different directions and in different technologies, while we know, even the great presentation that you just gave, we know that electrification is the best way for reducing emissions, but also increasing efficiency, use less energy, and abate the cost if it's done in the right way. I think, first of all, from the Parliament and for the industry, what we need to do is to try to reduce the cost of electricity. There will not be a will for the industry to translate to an electrified industry. So to have a huge investment into that, if, as you also say, the OPEX then doesn't go down. And to do that, we need to do something like a tax reform. This can come from the European Union, but we can push it, of course, and find different ways to understand, to create the price of electricity, because we know now it's very connected to the price of gas, and this is creating some problems. We have a tax system that is, in some cases, impacting negatively electricity rather than fossil fuels, and this is a problem. We need to do some risk-sharing mechanisms. So if I do an investment, I know that the risk is not just completely on me, but we can share the risk from a public. I can think about like guarantees, for public guarantees, public loans, different kind of grants you can obtain with different level of guarantees. Also considering the size of the industry and the companies, and that it comes to the other point, which is we need a support for SMEs. Like most of our economies in the European Union are based on SMEs, which don't necessarily have the initial investments, and we need to provide the possibility also for SMEs to enter the transition. And then, of course, the constant elephant in the room, which is the permitting and making it easier to actually have a transition, but that also is true for the grid. We know we will need a huge investments in grid, a huge work on the infrastructure, but that it also needs to go into the permitting sector and how to make it easier to modify the grid, because without a good, resilient, a flexible and digitalized grid, electrification is not going to be interesting. It's going to be possible, but it's not going to be as profitable, as convenient, and so not many industries and companies will want to do it.
Yeah, that permitting issue for grid infrastructure is one we hear about over and over from the sector for sure. Frauke, let's turn to you next. So you guys have your own report on this topic. How does the EDF scenario fit with your findings, particularly regarding the benefits of focusing on this low-hanging fruit in terms of CO2 emissions avoided?
Yes, indeed. We have our report. I mean, one was the one that Aurélie also mentioned. The study last year was Fraunhofer, where we looked in depth at industrial heat, decarbonization, and various others that we did on specific elements, including our climate neutral Germany scenario end of last year and some others. And by and large, really looking through also the figures you presented earlier, I can say we're very largely aligned. I was really trying to look for where the differences spring out, and possibly the biggest is that we're slightly more optimistic when it comes to metals electrification. But by and large, if you look at the ballpark, what we are finding is that 90% of not yet electrified industrial heat can be electrified with technologies that are expected to be available in the next few years, later 2035. And that 60% of the not yet electrified can be electrified with technologies available today. So there you have the low-hanging fruit, heat pumps, but also electric arc furnaces, for instance, that are already very commonly used for steel production at 1,800 degrees today and readily available. And now that is significant, and we've seen your numbers before. I mean, in the end of the day, process heat, is the single biggest energy user in industry and responsible for some 3/4 of the emissions from the industry sector. And as such, also responsible for a lot of the fuel dependency that we've got in Europe. So it matters. Now, in terms of the what are the barriers and what's hampering even the low-hanging fruit and even more the further steps, we come to very similar conclusions. I think, Aurélie, you had the 3 elements: technical, economic, and organizational. Technically, we've got what we need. The challenge is in the economics is in the organizational, i.e. grid connection, availability of the connection at that place where you need it at the moment. And there are various ways to address them. And one is obviously, your 9 recommendations, I think, are all to the point. We have the Affordable Energy Action Plan on the economic side that needs to be implemented. It's not going to bring about solutions immediately, but it's got a lot of very important elements that are needed to bring the electricity prices down and improve the price ratio between electricity and gas. Then also the whole OPEX question, that means streamlining the state aid, making it clearer what's possible also for OPEX support for strategic electrification, without hampering, very importantly, the signals that industry needs for demand response and efficiency, so it needs to be done well. But also when it comes to CapEx, and there we had the Decarbonization Bank, which, by the way, also in principle allows for OPEX support. Let's see how much comes of that. But for CapEx support, very important. Another element I'd highlight is the an industrial electrification alliance, similar to what we have for batteries, for hydrogen, an alliance to kickstart the industry, to bring together demand and supply, to kickstart a supply chain, is another dimension that I'd like to highlight. And the third is really this more organizational element of grid connection. And that means also that grid planning needs to already anticipate the electrification of industry, make available the capacities that are needed so that this doesn't continue to be a bottleneck. Those are just some of the main points there.
Great. Jean-Philippe, so you've walked us through the scenario's findings. What would you say are the main policy asks that would need to be translated there and that would get to where the scenario is pointing, particularly based on what we've heard so far from the other panelists?
The first thing that what I hear, maybe my reaction to reactions, if you allow me to do so, I think we are clearly aligned. In fact, what I understand is that we all agree that technologies are here. We all agree that electrification is the big part of the solution for decarbonization. Not the only one, as Philippe said, there are other solutions, but it's a big one that we need to move. And that we still have an issue in OPEX, as you mentioned, with industrialization and so on. Yet, one point I would like to stress is it's happening now. the technologies that we are talking about are long-lasting. We had a discussion with Philippe. He said that he still has some furnaces, no, turbines that are dating from 70 years ago. So we need to take now each change or each reflection or each thinking by industrial investors to see, okay, it's now that you have to decide to switch for decarbonized solutions. Because if not, that will last again 50 years or 40 years. Today, one figure, 40%, sorry it's French, but 40% of the consumption of gas in industry in France is made on equipments that are more than 30 years old. That means that those equipments within the next 10, 15 years will be replaced or changed. And if we miss that, then there's a locking for gas or fossil fuels for the next 50 years. So we're not talking 2050, we're talking 2070. Okay. So we need to do it now. So what do we need as kind of, policy? I think that all the instruments are almost there, and I see Europe is doing exactly the right move. I mean, we can discuss the speed, we can discuss the way, the fine-tuning of it, and we had a side discussion with Alexandre Paco just before. I think the movement is here. Then discussion of fine-tuning on how to allocate the different subsidies, what were the criteria we will do. That we need to have some discussion, but the main guidelines in Europe are here. And I think that OPEX is granted. Important is OPEX. Important is to look at the grid connection, which is maybe the missing part today. Permitting a grid connection, we need to do things to allow these things. But I think we are in the right track.
Xandre, you wanted to respond?
No, just maybe to say that I think we indeed are aligning a lot. Now it's time for action. In the Clean Industrial Deal, I think we have all the parts, the pieces of the puzzle. So be on the permitting side, we are now preparing, the colleagues in DG GROW are preparing the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act that will look very much at how to speed up the permitting. Having access to clean and affordable energy, the action plan that was proposed, and that's the colleagues of DG Energy working hard on that. And what we can offer from the side of DG Klima is very much the financing part. Because at the end of the day, what makes you, Philippe, convince your CEO to take this action, I guess, is at the end, you have a business case. Payback. Yeah. Some payback. So you have a market. It was interesting. You were saying we have a market for carbon-free paper, I don't know, you call it. So having lead markets, that's also very important. So how to create the lead market. And there we are engaged also with our colleagues in DG GROW, in DG Environment, on how to define these different low-carbon products, be steel, cement, paper, and chemicals. So for all of these products, we will need to define what is low carbon, because that will create certainty and also a market for this. But when we go back to the financing, what we hear a lot is indeed what we also heard from the colleagues from EDF. We need to provide guarantee that for the next 10 years, 15 years, decision can be made by CEOs for final investment decision that makes sense, that where there is a business case. And this is why we have been now proposing this industrial decarbonization bank, which is, by the way, not a bank. It's not a commercial bank. We took the name because of the hydrogen bank that you probably know about, and that's a bit the same concept. So how can we cover the gap between the cost of mitigation and the carbon price? Because today the carbon price is not high enough, as you rightly said, Jean-Philippe, to really stimulate the investment. So how to cover this gap? So the best is actually carbon contract for difference. And this is what we would like to also roll out. Today, it is very difficult in the current MFF to organize that because of the budgetary guarantees. And okay, I will not go into the detail of it, but that's actually very difficult. What we can do is what we call fixed premium. And this is what we did for hydrogen, where we say to industry, you bid on euro per ton produced, or euro per CO2 abated, or euro per megajoule produced for the case of heat production, and we put a competition around this and see where is the most cost effective to invest in Europe. And that was super interesting when we did it for hydrogen. We saw that first, by creating this competition at European level, you bring the cost down, because of course you really benefit from the single market. You make industry happy because you have one system and not 27 systems, where each member state try to provide subsidies. That is also providing guarantee for a long period of time, so 10 years. So what we're going to do for this Industrial Decarbonization Bank is we will start with a pilot already this year, 1 billion euros from taking money from the Innovation Fund, where we will basically pilot around industrial heat decarbonization. So exactly what you were talking about, how to have investment in technologies, in industry related to heat decarbonization. It will be a lot of course, about electrification, but we want also to keep it technology neutral as much as possible. So solar heat could be possible, geothermal heat as well. And we are, at the moment, opening the consultation. We have an open consultation on the design of this auction that we will launch by the end of this year, so that we can basically test the system of having an auction on electrification and decarbonization of heat. And we hope it will be successful, so that we can also be successful in the next step, which will be to build this bank and get the money, because we have a big number in mind, 100 billion euros for 10 years, which we think will help to decarbonize about 40% of industry. And for that, we will need part of it will be ETS revenues, part will be voluntary contribution from member states, where we also have good experience with the Hydrogen Bank. So that's a little bit our plan, but we want to make it happen as much as you.
Follow-up question on the Decarbonization Bank. How much is the strategy going to intersect with the Draghi report and the current concerns about competitiveness? Because we know that's kind of an overarching priority for the Commission right now. I'm thinking particularly in terms of the sectors that will be targeted. How will competitiveness concerns play into that? And how will the targeting for electrification specifically seek to maximize competitiveness?
Yeah. So it's very much a response to the Draghi report. The whole Clean Industrial Deal is the response to the Draghi report, and part of that is the financing angle that I just described. So we have fully, I would say, implementing what Draghi is kind of suggesting, recommending. He has also very positive, I would say, recommendation around the Innovation Fund. As you know, it's 40 billion euros, mostly for industry, but also clean tech that we are at the moment rolling out. And interestingly, I was looking into the actual project that we are supporting under the Innovation Fund. 200 projects, 13 billion euros, and about 1 billion going really for electrification in the sector of food, glass, chemicals, steel. So these projects, they come really, I mean, there is a big interest from industry to see this being realized. So I would say fully in line with the competitiveness agenda. In terms of how can we stimulate also the single markets? As I said, is by organizing this type of EU-level auction, by bringing one system to ensure that there is competition, and also by pooling resources from member states. We are big believers that we will not be able to do it all with EU money. We will need to pool also member states' resources into it. The Hydrogen Bank has been a very successful experience so far. The last call, we nearly doubled the 1 billion that we had put on the table, with a couple of member states that are going to bring money for the project that are going to be selected through the auction. So I would say this, something that we are big believers in.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of competitiveness, so Philippe, you said that the return is really very important when you're thinking about these types of investments. As a business, when you're looking at the cost-benefit analysis for a company like yourselves choosing electrification or fossil fuels, what goes into that calculation, and how, right now, with existing technology, are you able to make that calculation with a positive cost-benefit analysis for electrification?
Actually, it's more like a question about earning money. It's a question for paper industry, for printing paper industry. It's more like a question of just survival, because it's very hard time for paper industry right now. So, and we've been pushed by our customer for years to reach a net zero, the carbon-free paper. So the question is survival. Then we faced also a lot of difficulties to reach this carbon zero paper. The first one is the grid connection. Of course, right now, if we wanted to electrify our process, we need high voltage, very high voltage connection, and a new station for a factory like ours would be 5 years delay, maybe 3 if everything is speed up. So it's not acceptable as an industry. For example, in the factory I'm currently managing, we had already this station, this very high voltage station. So there was absolutely no work, no job on site, nothing, just administrative and paperwork. It took 1 year to get the extra power coming from 25 megawatts to 50. So that's the first thing, very important, very difficult for us. And the second one is about the high voltage transformers makers. There are few manufacturers of transformers in Europe, and they prefer to answer to order coming from big and major customers like grid operators or, I don't know, railway companies that can order them 20 to 50 identical standard transformers, rather than answering to us, which order maybe 1, maybe 2 very specific transformers. So we are put at the bottom of the list. And it's the same, maybe 3 to 4 years. So I need to see, as a manager, I need to see to seek for new transformers outside Europe, meaning North Africa, maybe Asia.
It's definitely a tricky analysis there. Let's talk about policy. Benedetta, we obviously had a whole raft of climate legislation with the Fit for 55 package in the previous term. When we're thinking about upcoming initiatives, one of them is going to be the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act, the IDAA. And that could be a pretty main legislative vehicle that can get these things moving on electrification. So in your opinion, how much potential does that have to get electrification moving? And what are you watching for as a legislator, as it moves forward?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think it has a very good potential if we do it in the right way. If we actually understand where to put our policies and how to solve some things. Like the Commission has already answered to some of these points. I also believe that the contracts for difference, the two-way contract for difference, would be a great way to do that. Now we are in the situation of renewing the MFF. Like in July, the discussion will be starting, and I think this is also something that we need to put into the discussion. Could we actually do a two-way contract for difference from a European perspective? Can we harmonize these kind of things? Can we make the price of electricity predictable? And this will allow us not just to reduce the costs in terms of price spikes, but also to reduce the extra profit in terms of, in case there's a lowering of cost of electricity. So we return these revenues to the actual public sphere, which is incredibly important at the moment. We see that there's a lot of energy industries that are doing extra profits, and that's something that we cannot allow. So that kind of system would be able to stabilize the price of electricity, stabilize the price of energy, but specifically electricity, and make electrification much more attractive, much more convenient. Then, of course, that's the second thing that we need to do. Like we saw that we said before, harmonization and permitting and so on and so forth, but we also need some subsidies and investments. So we are very glad to know about the electrification bank, although probably we need a bit more than 100 billion because it's a large sum. If we split it through 10 years, it's probably not enough, especially because if we want to look into the Draghi report, the Draghi report has actually said that we have a gap of investment between 750 billion and 800 billion a year for the next 5 years. Of course, this cannot come all from the public sector, even the report said that. But even if just 20% or 30% needs to come from the public sector, we need to make sure that that's coming from Europe. We're not quite, we understand there's going to be a state aid reform from the Commission, and that, of course, can incentivize the electrification and decarbonization. But we also know the risk of state aids and the inequalities that this can create. So we need to be sure that these investments, the subsidies and investments are actually coming from Europe, and incentivize some subsidies for electrification and disincentivize subsidies for for fossil fuel and environmentally damaging kind of investments, because at the moment there's still like around Europe 400 billion subsidized every year for environmentally damaging kind of investments. So this is something that we need to look into. So when we talk about the Decarbonization Acceleration Act, I really think we need to find some of the on one side, the easygoing, like low-hanging fruit, and something that can happen over the night because we need to accelerate it. So that can be on the contracts, but we also need to find a good way to invest and to have enough money to invest in the decarbonization. Of course, the simplification of the bank, it's a great tool, but if we could provide a bit more money, I think that would be a great boost for the sector.
So Frauke, we've just heard there the perspective of the industry, the cost-benefit analysis that goes into this, and that we're not quite there in terms of getting to a calculation where electrification is the clear competitive answer. And then we've also heard about upcoming pieces of legislation and policy tools like the Decarbonization Bank, like the Accelerator Act, which are in the works. Tell me, do you think that these two tools that we've just talked about are enough to make up that cost-benefit analysis, put it in favor of electrification? How can we make it so that electrification is always the competitive choice?
Nice. Are these two tools going to be enough? Well, let's see what's in there, but probably not, because what we need is a whole range of different elements and measures, and those two tools are two very important ones in the selection, in the basket. I mean, you had 9 on your slide, can be any number, but I think what's important is that the different dimensions are addressed, and those dimensions are, on the one hand, the coordination dimension, so basically an industry platform that I mentioned earlier will help, will be important. Then on the financial side, where we talked about the Decarbonization Bank, that will be particularly important when it comes to CapEx support, but also you mentioned carbon contracts for difference, very targeted, important OpEx support can come from that. We probably need more OpEx support than that, especially if those additional sums are not maybe coming at the scale that are needed that you mentioned. So there's likely going to be more needed as long as the price difference isn't fixed between electricity and gas. And here again, I agree with you that the state aid dimension comes with a lot of pros and cons. And yet, I think there needs to be clarity about how state aid can be used for strategic sectors. So that's all on the economic dimension. Again, we need to use the entire portfolio that we've got. Then I think the second dimension is or third, because I started with the platform, the third dimension is around the grid that I mentioned before already as well. Very, very important. Currently, honestly, a bottleneck in many instances. And we heard your example where the connection's already there and it takes a year. But we also heard you say, I think, 5 years if the connection is not there. I've even heard cases, especially when it came to very large electrification projects, where it was basically might be longer than 10. So that is something we seriously have to address and overcome by basically advanced planning. Those are, I think, some of the main elements that I would see. And then possibly, because you asked about Draghi, and we also heard the competitiveness presentation earlier, it's European industries, what's happening there. Another question is, how selective is Europe going to be when it comes to supporting different industries? And yes, the money is limited in the Decarbonization Bank. So what is it going to focus on? And what we currently see is, when we look at the Net Zero Industry Act, it's still a very kind of general approach, let's have it all. And likewise, when it comes to technology choices, even in Draghi, we see an emphasis on gas just as much as we see on electricity. So it's also a question of really making hard choices on what is really strategic for Europe's security, for Europe's competitiveness, for Europe's climate, or for the world's climate, but for Europe's role in the climate. And prioritize there. And I think the Clean Industrial Deal does some of that, but it doesn't do it all the way yet. So that's another dimension where I think work can be done.
Alexandra, you wanted to respond?
To ask Frauke, you said the Clean Industrial Deal does part, but maybe not all. Maybe having a bit more insight of what you have in mind, and maybe just to clarify, when we talk about these pilots that we will do for industrial heat decarbonization, we will cover both OPEX and CAPEX. Huh? This is very clear, because to create a business case, you really need both. So it's really about the cost for a project over 10 years and to compete across Europe. And also maybe just on state aids, there is a new guidelines that is been consulted open at the moment. And one important feature of it, and I want to mention it because it's linked to our discussion on financing, is that for the member state that want to pull money into the hydrogen bank, or in the future the decarbonization bank, there will be a facilitation of state aids, so that we kind of stimulate member states to spend their also scarce money into something that makes sense at European level as well. And this is something that we are very happy about, because that attracts member states to look into solutions that are laid on at European level, and not, like each member state defining their own subsidy schemes or defining their own priorities in terms of technologies. Here we want to have a technology neutral approach with CCFDs and have that organized at European level. And we attract member states by saying, you get a facilitation of state aids. But I'm happy to hear about more ideas. More ideas.
I appreciate your question, because I agree that the Clean Industrial Deal does get a lot of things right, including many of the focus points. In particular, I think where Europe hasn't taken a clear line yet is when it comes to basically external policy, trade defense, or generally trade measures, and how to position itself when it comes to different technologies. Right now, with the Net Zero Industry Act, which is basically still the basis for the Clean Industrial Deal, we basically have a blanket approach. Let's do it all. Draghi basically proposes a differentiation where he says, well, anything that's security-related, strategic, it's got to be subsidized no matter what. Anything that's very labor-intensive, where the profit margins are limited, well, let's try and find some cooperation with the current Asian technology leaders so that some of the value is retained in Europe, but let's not try to maximize European manufacturing for those sectors. And then let's support those sectors that basically are emerging, where Europe is having a head start, and where we are potentially expecting also continuous interesting profit rates. And I think this distinction is something that is currently not as present in the Clean Industrial Deal, and certainly not in the Net Zero Industry Act. So that's one element, I think, when it comes to the global context and clean tech, where further prioritization is needed.
Jean-Philippe, how would you say that costs for electrification can be reduced, and how much do you think that the two policy areas we've just talked about, the Decarbonization Bank and the Accelerator Act, can help in that regard?
I think, again, we have a lot of tools. All the tools are maybe not enough, and you ask for more tools, but we have already some tools. What is, for us, important is that we really make them visible and long-lasting. Investors need to know right now what's happening and what are the decisions taken, or what are the criteria, and so we should not reopen things that or re-debate during months and years about the things. There are things that are existing. And the second part is that we need stability, but as usual in regulation, we need stability so that the investors can come. And examples on that is everything which is a market design for electricity. We believe that we should not reopen the market design. I mean, the market design already is offering solutions for long-term visibility, PPAs-like system, where we know where to go, and that gives a framework for industrial to set up some prices and to make sure that their investment will be bankable on the long term. Maybe not 30 to 40 years, Philippe, maybe not 70 years, Philippe, but at least for the first 20 years or 15 years, you get visibility. So we need to do that. There are some, I know that when Alexandre, you will start to build all the criteria for your investment and to segment the different priorities. You will enter a lot of discussions on what are the good criteria, what is the carbon content of electricity. I mean, our vision is that we should make it simple as possible. And it's better to be straightforward and quick rather than entering long debate where we will delay innovation, we will delay investment in decarbonization. So we'd better do it now with simplifying as maximum everything that can be simplified. So that would be my vision where we should go. So I'm not an expert as you are in all the different mechanisms of Europe. I'm sorry for that. You're much more skilled than I am on that. But I mean, to give in general, I think we need to do it as fast as possible and to make it last as long as possible.
Frauke?
If I may just jump on one point, very much agree on the market design element that you mentioned. We should not open that. But there are certain things that we can do to overcome some of the main challenges currently. And I think one of the challenges that was mentioned earlier, I think you made the point about gas setting the price very often for electricity, is really enhancing the effort of reducing the hours during the year during which gas is setting the price. And we do that by basically improving flexibility in the system, leveraging the various opportunities that or possibilities that we've got to squeeze out gas during more hours of the year.
We believe that PPA-like solutions can give you the long-term visibility and try to make kind of difference between what is the price of electricity based on gas and the price of electricity that you will set up for the long term.
I agree with you that it's not a question of market design. The market design is the market design.
Okay.
Exactly.
It's also something that we've been discussing in the Parliament and in the committee, how we can actually not decouple, but like try to not make the gas to set the price without opening up the market design. And this is something that we are really in the will to look into and to find different solutions. I'm not sure PPAs actually have this power at the moment. It's also like we need to also think about the very short run, because in the long run, the best scenario, we're gonna have much more renewables, and then we don't have these problems. But then in the very short run, where now we need electricity to cost less, and now we need electricity to be detached from the gas, we need to find other solutions within the market. And this is something I think that the Parliament has already, we have resolutions asking for that. I think the Commission can really look into this, because it is more of a Commission kind of a field to understand how we can make this possible. Also to make the idea that electrifying and renewable energies are convenient.
Alexandre?
I just wanted to react on Jean-Philippe saying we need simple rules. And I was thinking what we are doing with the Hydrogen Bank and what we want to do with the pilot is also very simple, because we take the point that applying to the Innovation Fund, you didn't do it, no? Did you apply to the? No, not yet. Okay.
Even know it exists. Actually.
You didn't know it. Yeah. I go. We need to do some more outreach. Yes, but it means putting an application, 150 pages, maybe more. It's pretty complex. But that's okay. It has its reason, because we need to evaluate. But what we did now with the auction is that you bid on price. So you basically have to provide one number. I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's one number, euro per kilogram or euro per megajoule or whatever, and you will be assessed on that basis. So that's simplify a lot the life of the applicants, and we get very positive feedback on that, to say, okay, you have found a way to really provide subsidies in a very simple way, and you get guarantee for 10 years to have this fixed premium delivered upon delivery of either the production of hydrogen or production of heat in the future. So we're serious about that. We hear what you say. I mean, this is to have simple rules is absolutely key.
Philippe, one of the issues we heard about in the scenario was the challenges of electrification is facing in terms of the supply chain and the need for strengthening the supply chain to improve competitiveness. As a business, how important is it to you that the electrification supply chain is European? How important is it to you that the supply chain is strong throughout when you're thinking about these decisions on electrification?
Well, of course, it's better to deal with companies that do business around yours, so because of the contact, because of their spare parts. So yes, it's very important for us to have a technical support close to the factory, and not in China or other countries. And yeah, it's more. I can say that it's. We feel more secure with a European way of doing this kind of new technology related to it.
Jean-Philippe, what are the possible policy levers to strengthen the supply chain, given that we've heard that businesses are really looking for that?
Again, I think that as long as we have a strong push, like electrification plan that is planned somewhere, which shows a way that will create a condition for investment, but that's not enough. We also need to make sure that their customer, that will be Philippe or his peers, will go into the project. Because if you are in supply chain, you want to invest, you make sure that you will have customers. Okay. So you need also to make sure that Philippe, or like others, will select your solution compared to others, and that they will first do the project and second select your solution. So I think that what we need to make sure is that there is a kind of a solution for European market that is working, and that the preferred solution will be the European one. Then we need, of course, a long-term visibility, and maybe not sure that's something which is planned, but to have some help in terms of investment for those equipment suppliers. So they will not apply on tons of CO2 avoided, these ones, but they need some help in terms of how do I invest and how do I guarantee my investment if ever the market is not coming or if there's something. So how do I secure the fact that as an equipment supplier, I can really invest? And that's something we need to give guarantee. I don't know if there are things planned in the European package today.
To a certain extent, yes, on clean tech with the Net Zero Industrial Act, with all these resilience criteria that has been laid down. And also in the calls under the Innovation Fund, there we've also taken into account this resilience aspects. So for instance, the last auction we did on hydrogen, we added eligibility criteria, which is that you cannot, as a producers of hydrogen, have more than 25% of the electrolyzers supplied by China or outside Europe. So that's a clear signal. If you really have to contribute to building an EU value chain, basically. So we did that for hydrogen because there is a risk of over-dependence from China. Batteries is also a clear case for that. Now, heat pump, it's an area where Europe is still, Europe is leading and will continue to lead. And when we can, we see how best we can support again this value chain, European value chain, while knowing that we also are bound by WTO.
Yeah, I think first we need to have an interpretation of different policies, industrial, energy and trade policies. That's also what was written in the Draghi report. We need to integrate them. We haven't done that for a long time now. We've been wanting to go towards renewable energy and solar power, but then we never done industrial policies to push for the production of that, and that is a huge problem. And this is what we need to start. And it's not just a matter of suppliers would like to, buyers want to buy European or for the industry is better, but it's also a matter of security in this geopolitical context to be sure that we are actually autonomous, because when we talk about supply chain, especially in the energy and the renewable energy and the electrification sector, supply chain is also a matter of security. And it's also a matter of job creation and industrialization and capacity and power we can have as Europe in the globalized market. So it's extremely important, but we need to really connect the things. And connecting the things means also understanding what's the pushback at the moment. And the pushback is honestly the cost. We don't have competitive costs of our products. And if we ask to buy European, then the transition will be slowed down because the cost is too high. So how we can actually decrease the cost, and we go back into the energy issue. We need to decrease the energy prices to decrease the cost. It's the first thing we need to do. It's one of the biggest cost price setting at the moment, and it's also the thing that we can tackle the most. We don't have to lower the labor, we don't have to lower the quality, but we can lower the energy. And on the other hand, we need to understand how to scale up economy scales. So if our production now is so low, we will never have a decrease in costs. And that's where the strategy kicks in. And that's where I believe, if I have to draw a little critique to the Clean Industrial Deal, I think we haven't been good enough into having a vision. So it's very sector specific. We have the energy, we have the circular economy, we have skills, but we don't have a vision on where we want to go. And now we boost this strategic sector, their strategic supply chain and value chain, and now we develop the economy of scale in these value chains in order to make our prices competitive even within the value chain, not just at the bottom of the value chain, but to make possible to actually buy European. And then on the top of this, create a boost of demand in the public procurement, lead market. We really need to have a discussion how to create lead markets, how we are sure that we create lead markets for European and clean products. And then I stop, but also what is actually European? Because that's a discussion that we definitely need to have, because now we are talking a lot about buying European, but we don't know what made in Europe actually means.
Well, let's take some questions that have come in from the audience. Again, put in your questions on Slido. I'll get them here and put them to the panelists. First question is for Benedetta. The question is from D. Christie. Do you think the European Parliament will call for a revision of the Energy Tax Directive in this term, given that it was last revised in 2021?
everything is possible with this parliament, so I don't know. Hasn't been discussions about a revision of the energy tax directive, to be honest, but that potentially could be a discussion on it. I wouldn't know how to answer to this because this hasn't come through into the discussion. What has been said for sure, what I said at the beginning, that we need to create tax system that doesn't negatively impact renewables and benefits fossil fuel, because sometimes that happens. So this is something that we will need to tackle, and that's something that has been said in in different discussions. But I'm not sure if that will entail reform or revision, an opening up of the tax directive, energy tax directive. I wouldn't be able to say yes or no.
Alexandra, it's not your directorate, but...
I can say is that the Commission proposed already a revision of the Energy Taxation Directive a couple of years ago, but it's now still in co-decision, so the Council in particular has always a bit of difficulties to agree because it's unanimity on the taxation issues. But there is a very important provision that we, Commission, have proposed is to lower taxation on electricity. And that, we think, is a very important feature that should go ahead. So I think the Clean Industrial Deal called for the co-legislator to agree as quickly as possible.
Exactly. The block is really in the
But
council
maybe they
there.
still need to be a further revision. This I don't know.
Jean-Philippe, the next question is for you. Question is from Riley Kajaste. How do you see the relation of electricity taxes and OPEX subsidies for industrial players? Is it better to reduce the tax or increase the OPEX subsidies?
Of course, we would. I mean, as it is written in this equation, the less tax, the less OPEX. So it's better to reduce the tax so that you have to reduce your OPEX subsidies. I think so. Reducing the tax is probably the first one, and that will have a beneficial impact on the OPEX. At the end of the day, there's a difference that you have to cover somewhere. So I would reduce the tax first if I have to give an answer.
Frauke, I'd be interested to get your perspective on this also.
Agreed. Agreed. I mean, first of all, remove the tax. That said, if you do OPEX support, you would not do it like a tax that is basically a blanket approach for everyone. But if you do OPEX support, you've got to make it more targeted to make sure that you... Project by project. Exactly. Or, maybe not by project, but tailor the sectors and define it in a way, again, that it does not suppress market signals. And a tax reduction does not suppress market signals. It actually enhances them. But if you do OPEX support, it's also got to be tailored so that it doesn't suppress them.
Philippe, as a business, what's your perspective on this?
For my part, I take both.
Now you know about the Innovation Fund.
And now you know about the Innovation Fund, exactly. Next question is from Stephen to Benedetta. Question is, electrification is given ample scope in the Steel Action Plan, but it is notable that such a plan was not envisaged for the cement sector, despite similar investments required. What is your view on this?
Yeah, it's exactly like that. We will need to have a plan also for the cement sector. I believe it's a sector that is as important as energy intensive, and has very similar issues. And I would say that's something that we should develop a strategy for. So maybe giving this to the Commission.
Alexandra, let's take it.
Sorry, I joker on this one.
If I may
please
add possibly. Because, of course, we have different electrification potentials in the different sectors as well. And when it comes to steel, basically, well, the iron making is the challenging part, where currently hydrogen is basically the way that's most envisaged. But everything beyond that in the value chain can be electrified. We already have the electric arc furnaces today, but various other steps in the process are possible as well. For cement, we're talking about, in particular, the energy used for feedstock. where electrification is not really an option. And for cement, basically, technically, we have very different challenges. So actually, cement is one of the sectors where we will need to look at the CCS route. At least that's the current state of analysis and knowledge to move forward. Chemicals, again, is different. In chemicals, we have a lot of possibilities with electric steam crackers and other aspects that are partly currently on the verge of commercialization, where again electrification potentials are large, but again in chemicals it's less streamlined than steel, where we essentially have primary and secondary, but that's it. Chemicals is very complex, but by and large a lot can be electrified, especially again steam cracking, other elements. And then for feedstock, again, we need to look into different avenues, including, in that case, also, for example, I mean, we heard some things about bioenergy before. I would not necessarily agree that all bioenergy investments would stay and bioenergy production would continue, because there may be competing uses, including for feedstock for industry, that this would rather be used as material for the chemical industry moving forward.
But wouldn't it be exactly the argument why we need a plan also for cement, as it's so, yeah, because it's so more, it is just different. Maybe we cannot talk about electrification, but we can talk about decarbonization, but we need to have a strategy, especially when the sector is more complex, and to give a pathway, because if we don't start to decarbonize all the heavily intensive energy use sectors, then we will not be able to reach our goals. So I think that the two things should be taken into account.
So, Alexander, can we expect a cement action plan?
No, I will not comment on that, but I will just say that I fully agree with Frauke in terms of the pathways that cement industry is looking at. This is quite different from the other part of industry. I was actually this morning in the Parliament meeting the cement industry, and that's clearly for them. They talk about CCS, CCU, that's it. This is for them what matters most. Industrial carbon management, and we have this strategy already adopted a year ago. So now it's very much about how, again, to implement the industrial carbon management. But when we look at chemicals, fully agree, electrification is part of the pathways, CCU. So yeah, I think each industry has its own pathways that they know very well, actually. But they need a business case, again, to make their project bankable. I'll come back to this. Yeah.
Yep. I have a bunch of questions that just came in from the audience. So let's take this first one from Mathilde to Philippe. The question is, what is needed to promote low-carbon products, such as low-carbon paper, as you mentioned?
It means...
I think what is needed in terms of both finance and policy.
Yeah, as I said it before, for our second stage of electrification plan, we would need incentive for the OPEX related to this electrical boiler we plan to build. For the second step of electrification, so the combination of steam, high temperature steam pump and mechanical steam compression, the capex will be huge. It will be something like 50 million euros for one of our factory. So yeah, of course, we will need big incentive for the capex, not the OPEX. I think that was the...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let me add one dimension, because it's gotten remarkable limited airtime here, and that's lead markets. You brought it up, but we've talked about it remarkably little comparing with other Brussels events at the moment, because since the question was about products, I think we've got to make the case that lead markets, again, are a very important element to get the market going for low carbon, near zero emissions products. And lead markets means basically we need the entire value chain, so defining what is a near zero emissions product, what does it mean, how does it qualify, how do we standardize, but then in particular we have two tools to leverage it. And one is public procurement, which I suppose also can play a very significant role when it comes to paper. I don't want to know how much of paper, or maybe I do want to know, goes into, into basically public services. So that could be one dimension, to make it a standard that it is green, low carbon paper that is procured. And the second one is standards for industry. Like we have, and we mentioned cement earlier, I mean, we have in the EPBD, in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the standard for buildings, for new buildings, to have basically a share of low carbon cement, or low carbon buildings materials, not cement. That is creating a lead market. Now, we need something similar for products across the board. Make it a product for vehicles, to include near zero emission steel, near zero emissions plastics. That's basically another avenue that we haven't discussed much, but that is a lever that Europe has that does not require direct public support. Of course, procurement also goes back to the public purse in the end, but is a different route, really.
Okay, next question is for Jean-Philippe. The question is from Andrei Stanchik. Do you think the clean industrial deal should be more ambitious regarding integration and harmonization of the electricity markets to deliver affordable prices?
That's a good question. I don't know actually how to answer this one. Let's say we have. I will come back on the market design maybe. Yeah? We have a market that today, I mean, there's probably a lot of drawbacks, but it works. We have market design where we have spent time discussing what should be in and what are the mechanisms that it should be in. So this market is still local because of interconnection that are limited, and so you have still some spread between the prices of different countries. Yet it's rather homogeneous in terms of the way it's working. I mean, there's a mechanism, the methodology that is behind. So whether we should change that to try to have something, if I understand well, we should have the same price of electricity from Stockholm to Porto or Lisbon, I'm not sure. Today we still have some particularities, and it will be difficult to make it different unless completely changing everything and spending years redefining many things. Okay, so we still have local content. We still have different content in terms of carbon in the different electricity markets, as we have discussed before. So I think the way it works today is probably enough to make the industrial decarbonization of the industry a reality.
Well, finally, I'll put one last question here to Alexandre. The question is from Stephen Fleming. Stephen asks, alongside electrification, alternative fuels for the recovery of waste offer key solutions for heat production. What is your view in recognizing them as such?
So we are actually open a consultation on what type of technologies can be covered in our next auction. So I would invite this colleague to make his case. At the moment, the decision is not made. So we are looking at various options, actually.
Okay, well, before we wrap up, I do want to get your very quick concluding thoughts. So I want to just go down the table, and each of you, if you can give just 30-second answers. If we're thinking about 2040, what would you say is the most important thing that needs to happen in the next 5 years in order to make those things that we just heard about in the scenario a reality? So Jean-Philippe, we'll start with you and then go down the line.
I can make it in 1 second. Start now. I think that the thing is that we said we are almost ready. We have technologies. We have, Europe is working on different solutions to make it happen. We are all convinced that this is the way, so do it now.
Urgency. Frauke?
Boy, it's so many things. But I would say, we're hearing from the Commission very often, stay the course. And frankly, I think that's what it is. Now, don't cause new confusion. We have a changing geopolitical context, which in the end of the day only reinforces the track that Europe has started on. So stay the course and enhance it.
So consistency.
Yeah.
Benedetta?
Wow, it's always so hard. I agree with the last two. I would say that they go in the right direction, in terms of priority. If I need to think about the third one, it would either be really scaling up the investments, or having a very, very fast plan on the grid boosting, because nothing else can happen if we don't have the grid.
So investments, particularly in infrastructure. Philippe?
Well, in one word, we need to think about power consumption at the same time how we think about power production.
And finally, Alexandra.
Do what my dear colleagues have just said, do it together. And now?
Acting in unison.
Yes.
Great. Well, I want to thank the panelists so much for some really interesting insights here for an issue which, as I mentioned, is very live. I think one thing that became very clear in our discussion is that, yes, we've had a lot of legislation adopted in the last term, but there are really key policy tools here left for this term that are currently in discussion, like the Decarbonization Bank, like the Accelerator Act, that provide real opportunities to get us to the envisioned destination in the scenario we just heard about. So how about a round of applause for our excellent panelists? So I want to thank all of you so much for spending a bit of your evening with us. If you were joining us online, I wish you an excellent rest of your evening. And if you're here in the room, I invite you to do some networking straight outside with the reception. Have a great night.